Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy you're here. My name is Marianne and on this channel I explore various geopolitical topics and challenges. And today let's explore the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. So the South China Sea connects the Indian and Pacific Ocean. It is a maritime crossroads through which a third of global trade passes every year. Beneath it lies significant oil and gas reserves, and above, shipping lanes that keep entire economies alive. 6 countries claim part of the South China Sea: China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. But China is claiming a big chunk of it. This claim is not based on law or the geography, but it is based on the so-called U-shaped line that was first drafted by the Chinese nationalists in the 1930s and later polished into the famous 9-dash line, which Beijing now relies on to establish its claim. The area covered by the 9-dash line represents 80 to 90% of the entire sea. But no international institutions and countries other than China recognizes it. But even historically, the Ministry of Information of the Republic of China, which was not administered by the Chinese Communist Party, but in its handbook in 1947, when they were still in power, they noted that the southernmost boundary remains to be settled, and the sovereignty of the Tanshui Island on the south are contested among China, the Commonwealth of Philippines, and Indochina. So historically, there was even a recognition that the claim was disputed. But China doesn't seem to care, and their strategy is simple. Now that the line is drawn, reassert its existence, build artificial islands and send ships to make sure that the map comes true. Through fait accompli. They're trying to use international law, which allows a country to support a territorial claim by showing long-term peaceful and public administration of the area. But this only works if no other state consistently protested, and if the claim doesn't conflict with treaties or stronger historical titles. Courts weigh these factors case by case, but effective control alone is never enough to secure sovereignty. Despite this, fait accompli has been the most common means by which states attempted to take territory, even though it often results in armed conflicts. So what is a territorial claim and what does international law say about this? So in this case, legally, the dispute is quite straightforward. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, territorial waters go up to 12 nautical miles from the shore. The exclusive economic zones up to 200 nautical miles. And the coastal state only controls resources in its exclusive economic zone. Artificial islands give no sovereignty rights, and rocks that can't sustain life also don't give any exclusive economic zone. Everything else is unfounded claims, and so when China says that this sea is ours because Chinese fishermen came here centuries ago, that actually doesn't have any legal value, because these few scattered fishermen only came periodically, and this did not create any sovereignty. Plus, the island that China built and its ownership of reef do not entitle China to any exclusive economic zone. Still, China sent draggers to suck up sand and coral reef and create those artificial islands with airstrips, radar sensors, and anti-ship missiles sites. And this serves not only to control the area, despite lacking right over them, but also to increase China's military presence and defense capabilities. In fact, even though China's economy is slowing, its military spending keeps rising faster than its GDP, and within the military, the Navy and the nuclear arsenal get the fastest growth. Today, the People's Liberation Army, or PLA Navy, that is the Chinese Navy, is the largest in the world by number of ships in tonnage. But its technological capabilities still lag behind the US, even though that gap is closing fast. So why is China investing so massively? Why pouring billions into carriers, submarines, drone, missiles, amphibious ships? Well, because in Xi Jinping's worldview, naval dominance is not a luxury. It is the backbone of China's rejuvenation. And at the center of this mission lies Taiwan. Gaining control over Taiwan would provide advanced protection and projection capabilities for China. It would finalize China's rejuvenation agenda, bringing the last Chinese autonomous territory under Chinese communist control and allowing China to control major international waterways and shipping lanes. But this assertiveness in the South China Sea is infringing on other countries' sovereignty and rights. In 2013, the Philippines took China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in hope to get their rights recognized and stop China. And in 2016, the court's ruling demolished China's legal narrative. Although the court declared that the historic sovereignty over the islands and rocks was hard to establish and not in the court's jurisdiction, the tribunal clearly established that the 9-dash line has no legal standing and any territorial claim based on it are therefore non-valid. Even if China was to obtain sovereignty over the reef, most of them are inhabitable. They are rocks as defined by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which do not entitle China to any exclusive economic zone. And although China continues to claim its adherence to the convention, Beijing refuses to acknowledge the ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. And furthermore, China did not respect a commitment that it took with ASEAN in 2002 to manage conflict constructively and without aggravating disputes by colonizing uninhabited reefs. What are the stakes for China in the South China Sea? Well, as I said, Taiwan is a major objective for Beijing. Plus, the South China Sea is rich in resources, in fish stocks, oil, and gas. But China's reclamation projects have destroyed entire coral ecosystems. There has also been decades of overfishing, especially by China's militarized fishing fleet, which has devastated the stocks. But this is its direct regional zone of influence as well. And as a rising superpower, China is asserting more and more its power in the region. So what has been the regional response to China? Well, they're all rearming, not just because the US is telling them to do so, but because they don't trust Beijing. Taiwan, as the main target, is preparing for a asymmetric war, has increased the length of its conscription for young men, and is deploying mines, missiles, submarines, and mobile launchers. They're all designed to make any invasion too costly and deter China. Taipei has been investing heavily in coastal defense, mine layers, and shore-based anti-ship missiles as part of an explicit area denial strategy. In 2023, the Philippines expanded its defense cooperation with the United States, giving Washington access to 4 new military bases. The US has transferred patrol vessels and other equipment to help the Philippines police its exclusive economic zone. Vietnam has stepped up international arms purchases to protect its exclusive economic zone, buying air defense systems, anti-ship missiles, and patrol craft while deepening security ties with multiple partners to offset China's pressures. Malaysia is investing in new littoral and patrol ships and other naval assets to better police its waters and push back against intrusions and gray zone pressures in the South China Sea. Indonesia has beefed up patrols in the Natuna Islands especially expanded maritime surveillance and stepped up coastal guards and navy presence to deter encroachments near its exclusive economic zone. Jakarta has also persecuted incursions and publicly rejected Chinese claims over parts of its waters. Australia is accelerating capability upgrades, including through the AUKUS nuclear-powered submarine program and larger naval investments, and increasing maritime surveillance and cooperation with partners to guard sea lanes and deter coercion in the wider Indo-Pacific. AUKUS is defense agreements between the US, the UK, and Australia to support Australia's buying and acquiring nuclear-powered submarines to patrol in the region. The one big advantage of nuclear submarines is that they can operate globally without needing refueling, so on very long distance and for long periods. And finally, Brunei is adopting a different policy here. It does not project power within its economic exclusive zone and avoids really maintaining a presence in its maritime domain. Relative to other Southeast Asian states, this represents a policy deviation, and it's really marked by its deference to China and its reliance on Beijing to diversify Brunei's economy away from exporting oil and gas into a more diversified economy. But I could not really talk about this region without talking about the United States, which runs persistent freedom of navigation operations and conducts joint exercises with regional partners and supplies equipment and transfers, such as patrol boats, to bolster local navies. And they all aimed at preserving legal norms and denying unilateral control of key sea lanes, and especially in the Taiwan Strait. I think I can also refer to Japan, considering the recent remarks from Prime Minister Sane Takaichi, who recently stated concerning Taiwan that if there are battleships and the use of force, no matter how you think about it, it would constitute a survival-threatening situation. So Japan sees the fall of Taiwan as a national security threat. And the fact is, if China takes Taiwan, it gains access to deep water ports facing the Pacific. And Japan is also fearing what could come next. China had put pressure on the Senkaku Island and even put pressure on Okinawa by hinting that they were historically Chinese because they were tributary to the Chinese Empire centuries ago. So in this context, China's growing navy allows the country to become more assertive, but still Beijing seems to be careful not to push its neighbors to adopt concerted efforts against this claim and pushes for bilateral dialogue where it holds more leverage and power. Besides, the PLA hasn't fought a real war since 1979 against Vietnam, and that war was limited. So China's capabilities, strategies, and command have not really been tested in combat. The PLA structure and even technology has historically been based on the USSR's model, which has shown its limit in Ukraine. Still, the sheer number of its fleet poses a significant threat for neighboring countries and free shipping in international waters. So why should the world care about this issue? Why should you care? Well, it's the freedom of navigation that might be at risk. China wants foreign militaries, and especially the US, out of what it calls its blue national territory. International says that no seas are owned, ships pass freely. So Western navies conduct those freedom of navigation operations sailing through waters China claims. But China responds with harassment, dangerous interceptions, it attempts at blockades, and there are even collisions. This confirms, in the eyes of Western navies, Beijing's intent to limit freedom of navigation. And there is a risk associated with such conduct. It risks war by accident. If there is a collision and then a miscalculation, a nationalist overreaction, then suddenly you can have a crisis that no one planned for. And China knows this, that's why it advances just below the threshold. But with the tension constantly on the rise, this might be just playing with fire. So in conclusion, the South China Sea is a good illustration of China's rise and its pushing of the boundaries and international rules. China's claim comes from its policy objective of national rejuvenation and reclaiming its role as regional hegemon, at least, accessing key resources present in the region and controlling ship transits and who can access the region and these waters. China's claim may not be historically founded, but they are political and ideological. And to a certain degree, they create this myth legitimizing its claim. So the future of the South China Sea will define the credibility of international law, the safety of global trade, and the limits or lack thereof of China's ambition, and will reveal the balance of power in Asia and the fate of Taiwan. Taiwan, which is likely to be the next piece of the puzzle for China, which has established as an official target to gain control of the island by 2027. This would fundamentally change the power dynamic in the region, international shipping and law, and put pressure on the Philippines, especially to protect its islands, to protect its interests. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was informative for you. Subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!